What if I told you the fall of Rome was a mistake the world never had to make? What if one decision, one battle, one alliance, one stubborn emperor changed the course of history and the dark ages never arrived? Today, imagine a world where Rome didn't fall. It's 476 AD. The Western Empire is frayed, frontier legions stretched thin, the treasury bleeding silver, barbarian federates pressing like a slow tide. A young boy on the throne, Romulus Augustulus, is a puppet of stronger men. The name Rome hangs by a thread. The turning point is quieter than you might expect, a letter, not a sword. When Odoacer rides into Ravenna demanding power, the Eastern Emperor Zeno does something different. Instead of shrugging and letting the West fracture, Zeno backs a political solution. He recognizes a legitimate Western emperor and sends a measured force of reinforcements, veteran legions and bureaucrats, not conquerors. The generals in Italy, tired of endless pillage and aware that a fragmented Europe serves no one, accept a negotiated settlement. A deal forms. Rome remains. The barbarians are integrated as foederati under strict Roman command. The office of emperor is reformed, powers curtailed, tax collection retooled, and a new compact stitched between Latin patrimony and Germanic federates. That single change, Eastern willingness to intervene and a compromise in Ravenna, creates momentum. The Western bureaucracy, once gutted, survives long enough for reformers to consolidate power. Regional commanders are rotated. Local aristocrats are bought into a renewed imperial project with land grants and legal inclusion. The Senate is repurposed as an administrative council rather than a ceremonial relic. Roman law remains the law of the land, but now it applies to a new multi-ethnic Roman citizenry. The language on the streets begins to shift more gradually. Latin continues to dominate administration, but Germanic tongues leave deeper marks, creating hybrid dialects and a pan-Roman identity that stretches from Hispania to the Rhine. The immediate result is stability. With legitimacy restored and military reforms implemented, major barbarian kingdoms, the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, the Vandals, are folded into a federation rather than carving their own kingdoms out of imperial territory. Key cities like Milan, Ravenna, Carthage, and even parts of Gaul retain their urban institutions. Trade routes that had begun to collapse are reopened under imperial protection. Grain flows from North Africa to Italy. Olive oil and pottery keep arriving in ports up and down the Mediterranean. Urban life, civic administration, courts, guilds, public baths, endures on a scale our history lost for centuries. With Rome's institutions intact, the rise of localized warrior-based lordship, the classic feudal castle system, is dampened. Landholding remains tied to administrative function rather than purely military dependency. The church still grows powerful, but its monopoly over secular governance is more contested. Bishops do not automatically become the primary civil authority in cities when civic institutions persist. The papacy grows as a moral and diplomatic force, yes, but a resilient imperial court continues to check and collaborate with it. Christianity still spreads and consolidates, but syncretic practices and regional variations are preserved within a Roman legal framework that enshrines certain civic rights and taxes, a Roman Christianity instead of an exclusively papal one. Economically, continuous trade and urban continuity accelerate technological transmission. Roads are maintained, merchant guilds evolve, and new marketplaces arise. The preservation of Roman engineering know-how, aqueduct maintenance, masonry, mining techniques prevents the dramatic setbacks that our centuries-long fragmentation produced. In this world, water supply systems in many cities remain functional, keeping urban populations healthier and denser. That density supports specialized labor, craftsmen, metalworkers, shipwrights, and engineers who, working inside a continental market protected by imperial law, can experiment and iterate. The pace of incremental technological progress, better forge techniques, improved ship design, agricultural diffusion like three-field rotation adopted earlier, means European economies diversify sooner. On the diplomatic stage, a unified or federated Roman West is a different kind of power. It doesn't collapse into dozens of petty kingdoms, so long-distance aggression becomes riskier. Nomadic incursions into the Danube and Rhine are met with cohesive responses. The Eastern Roman Empire and the reformed Western administration, now less a mirror, more a federated partner, cooperate on frontier defense, sharing intelligence and military logistics. The Mediterranean retains its character as a Roman lake, politically interconnected rather than a patchwork of independent warlords. Now let's take a deep breath and consider how this continuity reshapes the world beyond Europe. In our history, rapid Arab expansion in the 7th century met empires weakened by internal division. In a world with a stronger, more centralized Roman West and a cooperative Eastern Empire, the initial Arab conquests would still be formidable. The energy of the early Islamic states and their military innovations cannot be discounted. But the outcomes could differ. A resilient Byzantine-Western alliance might hold key coastal cities and sea lanes, slowing or containing expansion in certain theaters. North Africa might remain contested far longer. Carthage, refortified under Roman law, could be a bulwark rather than a collapsed province. Trade between the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean would continue, and with Roman port control, cultural and technological exchange could accelerate in both directions. This containment, or at least managed interaction, means classical knowledge preserved in Roman libraries and administrative centers would continue to circulate. Greek science, Roman engineering, mathematical texts, medical treatises, many texts that in our timeline survived in monastic scriptoria or in the Islamic world, would remain central components of Western learning. The Renaissance in this world might not be a sudden rediscovery. Instead, it could be a more gradual flowering of continuous classical scholarship. Universities may emerge earlier as imperial chartered institutions in major Roman cities, producing more standardized curricula in law, medicine, and mathematics. Imagine merchant republics and imperial cities cooperating on maritime technology. Credit instruments and proto-bank systems that developed in our medieval Italian city-states might arise under imperial regulation, but on a broader scale across the Mediterranean. Investment in shipbuilding and navigation could speed up exploration. That means the Atlantic voyages of the 15th century might come sooner or take different forms, led by fleets operating under imperial charters rather than independent city-states. The Columbuses of this world might sail in the service of an imperial fleet, with different political and legal frameworks governing discoveries and colonies. Language and identity evolve too. Latin as an administrative tongue survives longer, shaping Romance languages along a different path, less fractured, more mutual intelligibility across regions. Art and architecture would keep drawing from classical idioms. Public monuments, arches, and basilicas continue to define civic centers. The aesthetic of empire, triumphal quadrigas, stone forums, engineered public spaces, remains a daily visual language, not a memory resurrected centuries later. Social mobility, while limited, takes different forms. Provincial elites can rise through imperial service rather than purely through local military bonds. A standardized legal code that extends rights to federated peoples fosters a broader civic identity. Slavery still exists, yes, but urban economies and a diversified labor market create alternative labor relations earlier. Wage labor for merchants, skilled itinerant craftsmen, and imperial bureaucracy jobs that reward literacy and training. One of the most consequential shifts is religious authority. In our timeline, the vacuum left by collapsed civic institutions allowed bishops, especially the Bishop of Rome, to gain unprecedented secular power. In this alternate Rome, the papacy remains influential, but it must negotiate with a functioning imperial administration. Popes become crucial diplomats and moral authorities, often mediating between emperor and federate kings, but rarely the final sovereign of large swaths of civic life. The result is a Europe where church-state relations are more variegated and negotiated across imperial courts and regional leaders. By the 10th and 11th centuries, the world looks very different. Cities are larger, literacy outside monasteries is more common, and centralized coordination allows for continental infrastructure projects. Roads, canals, standardized coinage. Scientific exchange with the Eastern Mediterranean and the Near East is regular, not exceptional. The balance of power shifts from rural castles to urban councils and imperial ministries. But, and this is critical, continuity does not mean stagnation. New ideologies, technologies, and religions still emerge. The human playbook of ambition, greed, faith, and curiosity remains the same. What changes is the stage, and that stage amplifies some voices and muffles others. So, what does this mean for the modern map? Would there be an industrial revolution? Would nation-states, as we know them, exist? Would colonialism take the same form? Those are huge questions, and the answers hinge on centuries of contingency. But we can sketch plausible lines. An earlier consolidation of legal systems and trade could bring forward proto-industrialism. Empire-backed exploration could create global networks sooner, and a pan-Roman identity might delay the rise of the modern nation-state in favor of imperial citizenship. In the next part, we'll zoom into 3 specific flashpoints and follow the ripples. The survival of Carthage in North Africa as a Roman province, a 10th century industrial experiment in the city of Aquileia, and a 14th century clash at sea that redefines transatlantic navigation. We'll track people, merchants, generals, priests, and sailors, whose lives show how big structural changes feel at ground level. By mid-7th century, Carthage is no ruined memory. It's a fortified Roman prefecture, its walls rebuilt, its harbors expanded, its grain fleets sailing under imperial banners. When new Arabian armies push west, they find fortified cities, coordinated fleets, and a Roman navy that controls coastal supply lines. The result is not total prevention of contact. There are wars, sieges, and shifting borders, but a prolonged stalemate. North Africa becomes a contested frontier where Roman, Berber, and Arab cultures mix. Scholars translate texts in bilingual schools, shipwrights borrow Arab rope techniques, and merchants trade across a Mediterranean whose ports remain linked by imperial law. The classical libraries in Carthage and Alexandria keep circulating texts. Knowledge stays plural and alive inside cities that never wholly vanished. In Aquileia, imperial investment in infrastructure births something like a proto-industrial district. River channels rerouted to power a network of mills and hammers. Guild charters issue standardized measures, and state patronage funds workshops specializing in naval hardware and mechanical devices. The result: faster production of nails, rope, sails, and treated timber, technologies that ripple into shipbuilding and agriculture. Apprenticeship systems and imperial contracts create demand for literacy and calculation. The city births engineers who exchange ideas with scholars in Ravenna and Constantinople. Social tensions flare. Guilds push back against aristocratic privileges, but conflict channels into legal reforms instead of fragmentation. Small-scale mechanization spreads across river valleys, raising yields and freeing labor for trade and craft. By the 1300s, Roman fleets, merchant convoys, and Atlantic mariners collide in a decisive fleet action off the Azores banks. Imperial cartographers, fleet officers, and merchant captains develop safer transatlantic routes and navigation schools under imperial charters. A century earlier than in our timeline, organized state-sponsored expeditions crossed the Atlantic with imperial backing, not lone private ventures, but fleets with legal frameworks for settlement, trade monopolies, and mixed crews of Roman citizens, federates, and coastal peoples. The Americas are encountered in a political context shaped by Roman law. Claims are administered, treaties signed, and colonial structures evolve under imperial courts rather than purely private patronage. Thread these ripples together, and you see the shape of a world where continuity breeds faster institutional complexity. Cities persist, markets scale, literacy widens, and technology diffuses under the protective umbrella of law. Empires still contend, and empires still fall. Human ambition remains, but the map is different. Nation-states rise later or in altered forms. The Renaissance is a sustained efflorescence rather than a rescue mission. Global connections emerge under imperial direction earlier. So imagine walking down a Roman street in 1600. Marble facades shaded by awnings, scholars debating in public basilicas, a fleet slipping out from a state port bound for a charted new world. And ask yourself, would the centuries of darkness we call the Middle Ages ever have felt so dark at all?